Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to this session on University-Industry Partnership, one of the Utopian Futures discussions as part of the Utopia Week here at the University of Warwick. This week, it's all about building partnerships, so it's very fitting that today we will be talking about the crucial partnership between industry and universities with three people who bring real insight and expertise to the subject. So I will be pleased to welcome in a few minutes Todd Hermansson from Lindholmen Science Park in Gothenburg, Sweden, Matt Windle, the Executive Director of Engineering at Lotus Cars, and Peter Scott from the Institute of Advanced Study here at Warwick, who is the founder of Interface Polymers. We'll be hearing from each of our speakers for about 5 minutes first, then we'll have a discussion with some questions from me as chair and from the floor. You may submit questions in the normal way on the chat. I apologise for the fact that you won't be able to see anybody else's questions. And I appreciate that does limit the nature of the discussion, and I apologise for that for reasons beyond our control. Anyway, what's really exciting for me is that despite the different backgrounds represented on the panel, there is a common theme in all our work, which is really appropriate for Utopia: how we can use innovation and research to help business become more sustainable, all the while creating more productive jobs and improving skills. Lindholmen's Electricity programme is putting electric buses on routes in Sweden. Peter's company is reducing mixed plastic waste by recycling plastic packaging, whilst Matt at Lotus aims to take the advances in technology made in the development of the EVIA electric hypercar and apply them to the entire transport industry. Taking research innovations like these and working with business to put them into the real world use is something we've been passionate about at WMG for 4 decades now. It's the principle behind all of our programmes, whether the Midlands Future Mobility Programme, which uses the roads on and around our campus, and our 5G network to develop connected and autonomous vehicles, or the UK Battery Industrialisation Centre, which takes the latest in battery science and scales it up for production at industrial scale. With these partnerships, and at WMG, I've had the benefit of learning that if we're going to achieve our social goals, whether that's the net zero economy, safe, automated, accessible mobility, or a circular economy with zero waste, we're going to need to bring industry, academia, and skilled, passionate people together to deliver in partnership. And the individuals that I've got the privilege of working with this afternoon on the panel have years of experience of doing just that. And I'm very keen to hear their perspectives on how to create strong university and industry partnerships. So I would like first to introduce Todd Hermansson. He will be speaking in a few minutes as our first speaker. Todd is the Chief Executive of Lindholmen Science Park, which was founded in 2000 as a partnership between business, the Chalmers University of Technology, and local government. And one of the main challenges for the community there at the time of its formation in 2000 was dealing with the decline of shipbuilding in the region. And Lindholmen's partnerships have been key to attracting the new jobs and investment and skills and training that the local workforce needed. And they have applied the heritage of engineering in the region to apply to exciting new challenges, which are issues we're very familiar with here in the Midlands. Todd's background is in automotive research partnerships, and now as CEO of Lindholmen, he leads an organisation dedicated to creating new partnerships. After Todd, we will hear from Matt Windle, who is the Executive Director of Engineering at Lotus Cars. You will all be familiar with Lotus as the maker of the world's most advanced hypercars, including the new electric EVIA. With that background, Lotus is very aware of the need to be at the cutting edge of new technology and of the importance of building partnerships to share knowledge. That's the mission of Lotus's automotive engineering consultancy, which takes the expertise of Lotus in propulsion, structures, materials and design, and applies it to other manufacturers, whether they're car makers, boat builders, or even designing new shopping trolleys. So I'm very glad, particularly glad actually, that Matt is here with us today, because WMG and Lotus are now partners in the new Lotus Advanced Technology Centre at Wellesbourne, where 130 engineers will be working on some of the biggest challenges of future mobility. And finally, we will hear from Peter Scott. Professor Peter Scott is Professor of Chemistry at Warwick and is also a great example of how academic innovation can lead to the creation of new markets and new products, as he is also founder of Interface Polymers. Peter set up Interface with his PhD student Chris Kay, and they invented a new class of polymer additives, which has grown to develop new solutions for sustainable agriculture, cutting plastic waste, and producing high quality, lightweight parts for vehicles, reducing energy usage. As an educator, Peter, I know, is passionate about developing the next generation, both as director of the Institute of Advanced Study here at Warwick and as a trustee of the new Model Institute for Technology and Engineering in Hereford, that is going to deliver future higher education in fields including timber technology and automated manufacturing in those sectors. So I'm now delighted to pass over to our first speaker, Tord Hermansen. Thank you.
Thank you, Margot. That's a very nice introduction. As you say, Lindholmen Science Park is an open arena for innovation. We offer a neutral environment where stakeholders, academia together run large research and development projects. And in fact, starting 2000, we this year celebrate 20 years having been involved in creating successful collaboration and new knowledge that contributes to the innovative power for Sweden. We know, in fact, that strong ideas come out of collaboration. But also looking back to my history and experience from the automotive industry, I spent, in fact, 35 years at Volvo Cars. The conclusion is the same, that collaboration between academia, society, and industry is fruitful. Of course, sometimes challenging, but in my view, necessary. The industry priorities, if you're take it from that perspective, which is mostly where I'm mostly familiar, there are priorities with university partnerships, and maybe you can categorize them in 4 different sectors. The one most obvious, of course, that industry get access to graduated students that can be employed. This is, of course, the main part of being in a partnership and having a relationship with universities in Sweden, but also elsewhere. But there are also research collaboration that could solve mid and long-term challenges. So we need to understand from both sides the needs, the possibilities, and how to do things together. But also from an industry point of view, it's interesting to be close to the university to understand even more long-term the research front and where it's taking us. What's the potential in that, and how could we eventually translate that into new product technologies or business opportunities. The 4th part, which I personally find very interesting, is that when we set up visible collaboration and partnerships between academia and the industry, we could by that also attract talent, students or other skilled people to come to Gothenburg and Sweden to join the industry and the enterprise. So there are many aspects of looking into the university industry partnerships, which we can continue to develop, of course. So with that very short introduction, I leave the word to Matt, I think.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today and to have this opportunity to speak to you. As was mentioned, thank you for the introduction, Mario. As was mentioned, it's a very interesting time for Lotus. We're on our path that we call Vision 80, and this is a 10-year plan that we have set for the company that started back in 2018 when we were 70. So we're working towards our 80th birthday. And one of the core elements of that is electrification of our vehicle fleets. And as was mentioned by Margot as well, we have made the decision that our Lotus Advanced Technology Centre that will primarily focus on high voltage systems, connectivity, safety, functional safety is going to be based out of the office on the Wellesbourne site. But we're also making that as the home for Lotus Engineering, which is our consultancy side of the business as well, because we feel that that collaboration between us as a company, the university and students can bring ideas that through Lotus Engineering and maybe with our partners that we can commercialize those ideas in the future, even though it takes some time. We feel that Lotus has always been a really open-minded company. We're open to any ideas. We don't think there's a bad idea, but what we can bring as an OEM that also produces vehicles is that concentration on cost, quality, time, and delivery. And I think it's really important that for academia to realise that for development and research to move forward, there has to be a commercial product at the end, and you have to be limited either by legislation, timing, cost, investment, those types of things. So the reason we're interested in the collaboration, as I said, is there's an opportunity for us to have bright young minds and different thinkers into the business, but also it gives us we can give back to the students and graduates is an idea of what is feasible, how we would deliver it, and where it can be used on vehicles as well. So hopefully you can see the picture of the Avaya behind me, which is pure electric. It's going to be the most powerful hypercar in the world, and that's technology is very challenging, and there's lots of elements that need to come together to make that car deliver. But taking forward ideas, inspirations into our future vehicle line is what we're looking to do, and we call ourselves kind of agnostic to technology. If we can find a technology or an idea that is going to enhance the driving experience of a car or the safety or the performance of the car, we will always look at those. So I think there's a good opportunity there for collaboration. We also have a history of working with universities, and we do have a route to market as well. So some of the systems that we've worked on around valve technologies, we worked on with Loughborough, that is now a commercialized idea and is in the marketplace and helping a lot of people develop efficient engines. So as I said, it doesn't just have to be through electric vehicle platforms, even though we're talking about that majority today. There's also elements where functional safety to make sure that vehicles are correct and safe for occupants, connectivity, apps to deliver functions. All of those areas are new, evolving areas that we are excited and looking to collaborate on, so that we can gather the ideas of everybody that's out there. So look forward to your questions. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you, and I'll hand over to Peter.
Hi, thanks for that. There's always a feeling when you're speaking at the last of a list of people that they will say some things that either duplicate what you're about to say or somehow contradict it. But it's just been really interesting listening to those presentations, because I'm in complete agreement with everything that's been said from my experience as an academic. As Margot says, I'm a chemist, professor of chemistry at Warwick, and I work in the Institute of Advanced Study as well. So I've been working in my academic work in drug discovery for a long time, sometimes with industry, but more recently I've become a Royal Society's Industry Fellow. And as Margot says, I've established a spin-out company as well. My recent work is in polymer materials, plastics and recycling. And I've been developing some wider collaborations in the university and business collaboration. So as part of this industry fellowship, I spend about half of my time, or it's supposed to be half of my time, working at a medium to large size international chemical company called Infinium. And in the last few years, we built what is the biggest industry collaboration at Warwick outside of WMG. And although now actually we're starting to work with WMG in that collaboration, which is really exciting. So we're working across 5 departments, in fact, and it covers areas of research, education, services, and so on. So it's multi-stranded, the work that we do within Infinium. In fact, one of the things that happened with Infinium was they helped us to establish our spin-out company. You could almost describe Interface Polymers, our spin-out, as a joint spin-out of Infinium and Warwick, because we're working in an area where we develop the technology collaboratively with Infinium, but where Interface Polymers works outside of their field of operations. And that technology is around bringing a recycling idea to market. We've got pilot plant facilities in the United States now, and our partners around the world are trying to introduce recycled materials into their high-value performance products. You probably realize that when recycled plastics are used in products, often the quality of those products is reduced. We're able to help to alleviate that and to introduce lightweight and recycled products to various markets. So my experience of industry university partnerships is quite varied, and I've been doing it for some years now. And I guess I've had a lot of conversations with colleagues here in Warwick and elsewhere, and also with people in business as well. And there have been some great successes that colleagues have been mentioned already, but I think it's also an opportunity now for us to be more ambitious even than we have been. Our stakeholders, as one of my colleagues has already said, expect us to tackle the big environmental, societal, economic problems that are facing us now. The particular group of stakeholders that expect this, I'd like to focus on, are the people who are going to come and study and research with us in the universities, and they're the ones that are inspired to work with us in these ways. So we have to make sure that our graduates are equipped for this future, and also for our research to have real impact in the world, and also to have it fast. And so we need fast routes to market as well. And in order to do all these things, the universities need strategic relationships with business. So this word strategic that people use a lot can mean all sorts of things, but what I mean by it is really 2 things. First, our aims need to be aligned with those of the business partners. We have to be careful not to behave like contractors or treat businesses like funders as if they were a research council. This works both ways, of course, and so the people that we work with and ourselves, we all need to be looking for the win-win in these relationships. The second thing that I mean by strategic is that the relationships need to be at several levels. So not just about research, but also in education, talent pipelines, student opportunity, and so on. And it's in building those synergies that the relationships become stronger. In all of this, and this goes back again to something that my colleagues have said, we need to remember what's special about universities. We're multidisciplinary, extremely well equipped, particularly in areas like science and engineering and so on. And we have access to almost limitless ideas and enthusiasm. So we need to really think about how we best align that potential, that human potential, with the joint task that we have in hand between industry and wider society. So thanks very much for listening.
Well, thank you all very much. Excellent presentations. At the moment, I cannot see any questions on the panel, but I know Anthony from our conference organising capability might draw my attention to some questions. Currently in the chat, there aren't any, but until I see some, I've got plenty of my own. So maybe I'm looking at the wrong. No, I'm not. Okay. Yes, really fascinating presentations. I wonder if the panel would like to comment, particularly, I think, this question from Matt, I think, and Peter, on the issue of intellectual property in these partnerships. Peter, you've established a company, a spin out. This issue must have crossed your radar. And Matt, I'm sure it's very important to you. I've been impressed in your presentation. You were talking about, how you are willing to, offer expertise to other sectors. This is obviously property that Lotus have had the ingenuity and the capital to realize. How does your company go about approaching that? Maybe come to Peter first and then to Matt with that one.
Yeah, you're right. Intellectual property is a big opportunity and a big problem, a big absorber of time and stress and worry. I guess that we established a very good with Infinium, established a very good basis for the intellectual property with our contracts team here, and also they were. And I think this really speaks to the kind of level of partnership that we have, that when we have patents with Infinium in the particular area of polymer technology, they realized, and we all realized, that we could exploit it outside of their field of operation. So they allowed us the opportunity to patent in other areas. And so we've done that collaboratively with them. So but I think that's kind of a very privileged situation, really. So quite often it doesn't quite work out as readily as that. I think I would say my own view on this and the way that universities should be thinking about this is that the IP needs to be in the right hands for the most impact. I think we can spend way too much time trying to own intellectual property and managing intellectual property that we really don't have the resources to exploit properly. If we were to be focusing on more about the impact that we can have in the world rather than the amount of money that we think we might be able to make out of it, I think we'll get a lot further and a lot faster. So one of my board members at Interface Polymers says it's better to own 5% of nothing, 5% of something than 100% of nothing.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that we need to wrangle with as universities, and some are taking that route already, actually.
Well, many words of wisdom there, Peter. Thank you very much indeed. I'll come down to you, Matt, from the company point of view. Do you have anything to contribute to this question?
Yes, it's a really good question as well, because IP is difficult. As Peter said, where is the value in the IP? Is it the initial idea, or is it the 2 or 3 years that have taken to industrialize it and the cost of industrialization? I mean, we look at it as we try and share the IP, but fairly. There's benefit in my personal view on it is you have to give something back on IP, because it just keeps the encouragement for new ideas to come through. If people are just coming up with ideas and then somebody's taken them and run off, they're going to lose their interest in the ideas generation. So, and it doesn't necessarily have to be around just the IP as well. There can be recognition for a lot of people if you develop their ideas and take it to market. If you give them recognition for that idea, it's worthwhile as well as the value. So there is no one straight answer to this question. It's always different on however many partners are involved, what level of effort has gone in by those partners, and the route to market for the technology as well. So I would say a fair sharing out of the spoils is the way we should go. And we need to encourage this hopper of ideas that finally filter down to giving us a product at the end. And things change as well. An idea that we might be working on for a car, for instance, may be better suited to transport or something like that. So something that you maybe think you're not going to commercialize that much, you can then suddenly get fitted to 100,000 trains. It becomes a different prospect. So it's really hard to give you a straight answer. But
I think you've done a great job, Matt. I must say, thank you. Lots to think about there, and I think also you have a really healthy approach to it at Lotus. So, you know, brilliant. Right, I'm going to move on now to a question from one of our attendees. I'm sorry, it doesn't come up with your name. Apologies for that. But anyway, the question is, how should we draw more SMEs into university business partnerships? And while I give the panel a few moments to think about that, I can also make a bit of a response here, because at WMG we have, I mean, a particularly good way of doing it, I think, is to form multi-partner associations. So, for example, yesterday, we had the first meeting of a new network of SMEs that Professor Mark Swift at WMG has established across the West Midlands, with about 90 SMEs who have joined his Sustainable Production Innovation Network. And that will bring expertise to those companies at various levels of buy-in. You can just be a member of the network and get updates from some of our top professors in the fields of sustainability, be that, you know, energy or materials or whatever it is, or at a more involved stage with another network that Professor Swift also runs. This is a we call it Manufacturing Made Smarter. And what we do on a company by company basis for SMEs, with SMEs, I should say, is work with them to digitize their manufacturing processes. And this has been going for a few years now, and WMG have formed partnerships with over 3,000 SMEs in the Midlands part of the UK, during which time we've managed to help and work with and partner with these SMEs in the development of hundreds of new products and new processes, all of which have benefited from our expertise at WMG in digitization. So those are some ways. It usually requires a collective approach, as in the Sustainable Production Innovation Network, but it can also be one-on-one, one with one. Our Digital Made Smarter program is an example of that, where we really get alongside individual companies and help them digitize their manufacturing processes. So that's all for me. Would any of our other panelists like to comment on how we could draw more SMEs into to get the benefit of partnering with universities? Matt?
Yeah, can I jump in on that one? I think one of the areas that's very interesting is through the government funded research programs as well. So you have the APC, the Advanced Propulsion Centre, on your site, and they are very good at making sure that SMEs are involved in the process, along with universities and other and OEMs as well. And I think opportunities for those types of programs are a very good way of getting the collaborations between the universities and the SMEs. It is hard for the SMEs because maybe they don't have as much spare cash for R&D, so they do need maybe to have a commercial option more than some other areas that have got big R&D budgets. So I think that's one way that I would put forward that is interesting.
Thank you very much. That's a very good point, Matt. Todd, did you want to comment?
As I continue on what Matt was saying, I think that because I agree, I think that using the more broader program where we can involve many stakeholders, both from society, academia, and the industry together, it makes it also an opportunity for the smaller companies to be part of the process, and because it's much of understanding their needs, and they of course need to understand what's out there, what's available, and being a small sometimes small player, as Matt mentioned. It could be hard to set aside resources that sort of scan more in general, so that they need to find areas which is more spot on their problem areas or growth areas, and involve themselves in different type of collaborations. And in fact, that's very much what we're doing, what we're offering. We're offering a platform where we, together with the different stakeholders, can analyze their needs, see where there are common interests, and whether we can set up projects or programs that can attract many, and we can, together with some industry or government funding, get that started, and building networks, building the collaboration, and in the long run creating results that is valuable.
Thank you very much, Tord. Yes, the question of the resources that SMEs have at their disposal is a critical factor. Peter, did you want to add anything before we move on?
Yeah, you're right about the resources. I mean, SMEs have got a long shopping list and not very much in the way of money usually to apply to it, but they also need speed, flexibility. They're going to be looking at smaller things, not larger things, and so on. And I think one of the things I learned sort of for my SME, as it were, is that they have got me as an ambassador, so I can help them to get in contact with various parts of the university. So they have got me kind of with a bit of a conflict of interest, which I declare all the time, of course, saying they can do things in various places. And you can imagine a situation where our SMEs had that kind of ambassador for all of them in the ways that you describe, so they can be really helped quickly to get hold of the resources and the help that they need, and that will be extremely good. So that's something that we can focus on, I think.
Well, thank you all very much indeed for your comments on that. I ran my own SME for quite a number of years until the early 2000s, and what I remember being short of most was time, and this is as much of a shortage as capital, I think. And I think that SME has to have the discipline to realize that if they're too short of time to benefit from a partnership of the kind we're talking about, then that will limit their growth in the end. And they need to find a way, whether it's delegating or whatever way, they need to find a way to invest the time necessary, because what academia has to offer is just so valuable, even if it's just the long view, because so many SMEs are really short-term focused. And you need that discipline to force you to look at the longer term, which is where academia is so successful. Right, on to the next question. Several coming through now. Thank you all very much. Are there any opportunities for academics in arts and social sciences to develop deep industrial partnerships? I'm not quite sure whether what sort of answers we are going to provide here. Certainly, by way of kicking this off, in terms of social sciences, at the moment with the COVID crisis, there has been a real upsurge in interest in behavioural psychology, which is a social science. And I think that's led to quite a lot of partnerships certainly with government, and I would suspect possibly with industry as well, in terms of the vaccines manufacturers. AstraZeneca, fantastic British company, they, I know, have partnered brilliantly, clearly, with Oxford University. And it's not just about the scientific development of the vaccine, it's also a lot of it in terms of the clinical trials and the ultimate usage and take-up of the vaccine is drawing in on behavioural sciences. So that's one example. Do our panel have anything further to say? I'm not quite sure. Yeah, Tord,
yes.
please.
Well, I can elaborate a bit on that. I think there are very good opportunities and interesting opportunities to do just that, to put together the cultural side, arts, design, maybe other areas into the traditional industry. Because if you look at the automotive industry, it's transforming quite rapidly, and not only in electrification, it's how you use the car. Do you even own your own car? But there is more of a shared economy, which sort of is growing rapidly. And there are ways of developing the interaction between using the car, the infrastructure and the building of society, the infrastructure, and you need to have new ways of illustrating that or communicating it, or having the interface between the traditional machine and user. So I think there are many areas where in fact the car industry would be quite interested to have a dialogue or collaboration with for instance stakeholders from the art area and so on.
Oh, thank you very much, Tord. Peter, I know you have something to say on humanities.
Yeah, my part of my job, I work in the Institute of Advanced Study, and a lot of my colleagues, my research fellows in there, are in humanities subjects. And this is the area where it's perhaps the most challenging to get collaborations with businesses. But I think there are big opportunities here, and for the universities actually. So it's hard to be general about it in the way that you can say, for example, the subject like chemistry or physics or engineering or something. But there are lots of examples, and I think if we get some of those out there, then we can inspire people to do this without letting go of their kind of academic ambitions as well. So, I mean, a couple of examples that we've been looking at recently. One of our research fellows has been who works in ancient Greek lyric poetry, is working with a ballet company to develop a show, and that would be amazing. We have somebody who has been working also in the area of music, in mapping the way that music works and around in medieval times, and they're working on a software solution for tracing that activity, which has got applications in other areas in music copyright and so on. And also we have a historian who has been working on video game companies working on that. So actually the closer you look at this, the more obvious it becomes that there are big opportunities. And so I think it's really just that, I mean, for my part, because my natural bent is to think about applications and working with business, I think if you can infect these people in these subjects, particularly younger people working in these subjects, with this idea that they can really do this to mutual benefit, then I think that there's a long way to go with that. It could be really exciting, I think.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. That was fascinating what you were talking about.
It's great fun.
Really, really fascinating. And of course, we do have a brilliant ecosystem of the gaming industry on our doorstep here in Leamington Spa, where a great many SMEs and quite big companies actually among them are specialists in video gaming. And I know that we're doing more and more with them, with that sector at the university. So fantastic. And now a question from someone I know. I'm delighted to see you, John Ferry. I wish I could see you, but alas, we can only see each other on the panel. But John, you're very welcome. I'm delighted to have you at the Utopia event. And your question is, what more can universities like Warwick do to accelerate their engagement with industry to form new sustaining partnerships? Now that's quite a broad question, and I think that certainly at WMG, I mean, our whole ethos really, ever since we were established by the late Lord Bhattacharya, has been about forming partnerships, deep and sustaining partnerships. Some of our partnerships, such as the one with Jaguar Land Rover, go back many years, and I think I wonder if I see Todd, you have your you're ready to speak. Did you have something you'd like to say about how we could, form more sustainable partnerships between industry and universities?
There are probably many ways, but I think you should go back to the one of the key areas for the university, which is students and the education, and I think there are big opportunities to expand the relationship in student programs, and whether that is exchange programs, or there could be reference groups setting up represented by the education programs, and also the most relevant parties from the industry to discuss or look into how students groups could be more relevant for the industry, or how they could be stimulated from the industry. I think there is a big opportunity to build from the student level to create more long-running sustaining partnerships.
Thank you very much, Tord, and I'm glad that you reminded us about the fantastic partnerships around education, which, you know, WMG have very rich partnerships over many years on education. Did anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, I'd come in on that if I can.
Yeah.
I think as well is adding value is a very important thing to industry. So if through academia can add value, but more importantly, I would say is solve problems, because the majority of our day is based around problem solving. So if you have a mentality that the study, the research, the work you're doing is to solve a problem, and you're answering a question that's out there, that very quickly becomes a sustainable working relationship. Because what tends to happen is, and I know in my industry, we very rarely celebrate the successes. We just look to the next problem and move on and try and fix that one. So there's that generation of ideas initially, but then if you get people that are of the mindset of taking an issue, and it could be massive, it could be, you know, the social impacts of transportation, or Tord mentioned it about something that we're seeing is we're trying to work out what the future owners of vehicles will be. Will they have shared cars? Will they have car park spaces? We know, for instance, that there's housing areas going up in London now that have no parking spaces, and their argument is, well, it's next to a tube station, it's got good buses, but we still want to draw people into buying our sports cars. So how do we share those cars with them? So there's a wide breadth of ideas and problems that need to be solved, and I think that's a good way to get a sustainable relationship.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you. Right, I shall move on now to a question from Thomas Crispiels. And he wants to know about firms in terms of whether they can, to what extent do businesses look outside of the national borders for university-born technologies, or are the partnerships really conducted at a more local, regional level when it comes to the sourcing of technology and development? I'd like to ask Peter, maybe you have something to say on this.
Yeah, well, it depends greatly on the particular business and university. My experience is that if the businesses can find people to work with, working on problems, as Matt says, that are local or in the same region, then that's extremely helpful. That's maybe 2019 thinking. However, things have changed a lot this year, and so. But at the same time, the businesses, particularly larger businesses, are interested in tapping into wherever they can. There is, however, a trend worldwide, I think, for businesses to look at a selection of universities that they regard as being their key partners, rather than distributing their activities across a large number of people, so a large number of institutions. So that then reduces the opportunity for sort of tactical interventions around an individual problem. But I guess it really does depend on it. In my experience, for example, with Infinium, that they work with about 5 universities in a large way around the world, Warwick being pretty much the biggest one. And but at the same time, they have occasional collaborations with others around specific things that they can help with, and they're all international. And similarly, Warwick works with international parts of the business around the world. Thank
you, Peter. Tord, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, it's basically the same thing, but continue on that. I think of course, for the bigger companies like the Volvo companies or Jaguar Land Rover that was mentioned, Of course, they will look abroad on a global base for where are the most interesting technologies born. So strategic partnerships in terms of research, new technologies, they will look wherever. And I agree to some extent, it's the strategic partnerships are established with universities in those particular regions. But then again, coming back to the student issue, so there are more local needs, of course, that if you have your research and development organization located in Sweden or in London, you will need to have strategic alliances with universities that deliver students in that region. So there are more of a sort of a research partnerships that could be established more on a global basis, but there could be talent partnerships that is maybe more of a regional setup. And again, it depends a bit of the size of the company, but of course this happens, and it's increasingly happening as I see it.
Thank you very much, Tord. Thank you. I'm just conscious of time. We've got some time left. I'm going to bring the session to a close to a couple of minutes before 1 o'clock. So we have 2 more questions. I think it's probably best if we take them together. So I will read them both out. First one is from Simona Rataj, and she asks, how do companies go about finding new partners from academia? What sort of process do they go through to search for new ideas and new technologies? Very interesting question. And the second one is from Nikki Muckle, and she wants to know, what could EUTOPIA do to help form and develop these sustainable industry partnerships in a European international context? So I think that's very important, especially within the European context, as we have many European partners at the University of Warwick. So thank you, Nikki, for that question. So how do companies find new partners? What processes do they go through for searching for new ideas and technologies, and what could EUTOPIA do to foster these sort of partnerships in an international European context? Matt, would you like to come in first on either one or both of those questions?
I don't think I can really help with the second one, but I think the first one around how we find partners and new technologies. For us, and I'm sure it is the same for many OEMs, we will have a technology roadmap, and we will have that will be mapped against the product introduction dates that we have, so we know when we want to bring new technologies on site. And there's various ways of us working with academia and how we approach them. For an example is one program we've got at the moment where we're looking at a lightweight electric vehicle platform, where we're trying to significantly reduce the weight, which has a knock-on to range and performance and all of those elements. We went to a university in London that we knew had the technology that we're looking for. So they had the material science for the alloy that we really wanted to get. However, another way to do it, and a lot of companies do, is to do competitions. So to open up for a design competition or a technology competition, and then you open that up to the universities, and then you get a pool of ideas that come back, and then you can develop those, which is another good way of doing it, and it is quite interesting as well, because you see all the interesting ideas. And then the final one that I mentioned before is through government research and government grant programs. There's always an element in there that they like the OEMs to work with university partners. And I've mentioned the APC before, but they're really good at matching up companies with the right institutions as well. So, but I would also say for people to work the other way, if there's academics that have an idea that are interested in working with OEMs, is get to the events, get to the, as Peter quite rightly said, 2020 is a bit different, but there's like the low carbon vehicle event that's always held at Millbrook every year, that was online this year, is to do a bit of work the opposite way. Is find out, I'm going to set myself up here, but maybe find out the email addresses of the chief technical officers in companies. And I know that I don't necessarily answer to every email, but I always forward it on and say to people, have a look at this technology, there's an idea there. So I think my message is, don't just wait for industry to come to you. There's the opportunity to be proactive and go to industry if you've got the right idea and you're committed enough to developing that idea as well.
Thank you very much, Matt. That was very good advice, actually. I shall bear that in mind. Thank you. Yes, Peter, did you want to come in next?
Yeah, Matt said quite a lot of things that I was going to say about how to get in touch with industry, so I won't repeat that. But I was thinking about EUTOPIA and what it can do. I think that, well, the universities have got, as I was mentioning, super facilities in all sorts of ways, lots of ideas and lots of human potential as individual universities, but as a collaboration, then EUTOPIA is so much better than all of that. And if we can find a way of letting businesses quickly access those technologies and those pools of human capital, then through EUTOPIA, then that makes each of the individual universities in the alliance so much more powerful. So I think that's some way that we can do it. We're already making some progress in that area. For example, with the EUTOPIA CIF program for develop, we're going to be recruiting 76 postdocs in the next 5 years into that area, and the intention there is to be working with business in as many of those as possible. So that's another way that EUTOPIA can help with it. But I think that finding ways of connecting the different elements and capabilities that we have in the universities in the EUTOPIA, then that could be really powerful.
Thank you very much. And did you want to say anything, Tord?
I'm not sure that I have any extra on that, but I think that I agree with Peter that EUTOPIA has an opportunity to market, if you want, what are the strengths with this network, and in that what are the key competences or capabilities from each and one university involved in the network. So having that more visual and communicated to the industry, of course, helps to get also partnerships being initiated.
Thank you very much, Tord. Actually, as it's still only 12:52, we do have a chance for another question, and there is one. So there's two, actually. One is from Jorg Morales. I think you're from WMG, Jorg. Welcome. Along the supply network, he asks, from the key partners that WMG is working with, how is WMG working with suppliers to find further solutions beyond the SME? Is that part of the partnership or just for innovation within the specific manufacturing technology of the partners? I think that during the discussion, Matt has brought out some of these issues already in terms of the specificity of the research and technology that the industrial WMG partnership is working on, and how that can be sometimes applied outside of the direct partnership. I don't know whether that's what you're getting at, George, but it strikes me that we do look for opportunities beyond the specific brief that we're working with a company on. We have to be mindful of IP issues, of course, and we working within the spirit of the collaboration. If both parties are keen, then we're keen as a public institution to broaden the knowledge base beyond the particular SME. So also the point that Matt has also made about the institution of the APC, the Advanced Propulsion Centre, is also very disciplined in making sure that SMEs benefit from some of the publicly funded, as much of the publicly funded research as possible, so that it isn't just partnerships between institutions like WMG and big OEMs, that SMEs benefit from it as well. Did anybody else want to comment on George's question? Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I have a kind of list of things that people have said to me that business wants. So, people are always asking the question, "What is it that business wants?" And everybody always thinks that that nobody knows. So I've sort of made a list of over the years of things that people have said to me,
Great.
and maybe I should sell it. But one of these, one of the things on that is business to business relationships. Getting at university, so getting access to value chains and getting access to collaborations with other businesses, something that we can broker. And I know Warwick does this very well, particularly through WMG, and the SME partnerships that have been developed there are a crucial part of that, is the way that they develop relationships with other businesses. But actually also we think about companies, a lot of the business that they do in inverted commas is of course with other businesses, and particularly if they're working in new areas. So Infinium are developing new business areas, and they're really keen to develop develop relationships with other people to create new value chains where they don't actually work, they don't have much contact in those areas yet, whereas universities do. We work with so many people, and we can probably do a lot of good by recognizing that value we can add.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. We've just got 2 minutes to squeeze in the last question from Diana Coker. Now, I know, Peter, you already answered this similar question, but Diana is a humanities PhD student. She specialises as a visual artist, and she would like to know how she could articulate her discipline in industry, maybe in the context of a Utopia programme. So I'm not quite sure. I don't feel that I really know Utopia well enough yet to comment on how best Diana could do that. But if anybody else has a view, I would like to hear it on her behalf. Do you have anything to, I mean, she's cited a few examples where she could work in galleries or theatre, at art residence in the first level institutions. It is always hard to make that first break. So any helpful advice we can give to Diana would be great. Peter?
Yeah, sorry.
No, you go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, it is hard to answer that sort of question without actually speaking to the questioner directly about this. But there are probably quite a few things that we can do already, either through Utopia Alliance or through other activities within Warwick that might expand out into that. Sort of impact opportunities for PhD students and others that we can fund small activities that might grow into larger things, and put them in touch with people who might be able to help with that. So, like as Matt says, I'm putting myself out there, but if there's anything I can do as the director of IAS, which is something that we work on quite a lot, actually, then please, don't hesitate to get in touch about that.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. I think Diana will be very pleased with your answer. And all the very best to you, Diana. I'm going to bring the session to a close now, first by asking the panelists whether there's anything else, really that you would like to add before we close. No, we're all content. Anyone?
Yeah, I can call in. I can jump in. I'd just say thank you for the opportunity. It's great to come along and be part of this discussion. And thank you to my colleagues on the board and to Margot for hosting. I think, my point I got across is it's about innovation. It's about being proactive, and it's about solving problems. If you keep that in mind, I'm sure everybody will do very well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you, Matt. Really has. Todd? Peter?
Well, thank you for being invited. I think it was a very interesting discussion, and we could probably have been talking for quite some more time. I think one area we haven't mentioned that much is the mobility between academia and industry, having researchers or professors going spend time in the industry. I think that's also a big opportunity to create partnerships, but that's maybe for next session. So thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Just very briefly, thanks ever so much for the opportunity. It's amazing how much commonality and agreement there is in this area.
Yes, Thank you very much indeed, Peter. Well, thank you all, Todd, Matt, Peter, for your excellent contributions. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending and for all your questions. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a great deal, and I hope everybody else has too. That is the essence of Utopia. Thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank Anthony, who is behind the scenes making all this possible. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you all, and have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye.